Hi, I'm Josie, Godfrey. Not going to do a long introduction. We have a lot of speakers in this session and we want to try and stick to time. There are strict instructions. Our first half, they will speak for 4 minutes, no more than 4 minutes. 4 minutes. If they are the quickest, there will be a chocolate bar prize. I kid you not, I will be timing them. If we get through, the second half have agreed they don't want to do slides. We're going to have a discussion. So we may have the clearest, and there might be a second prize for the first half if they're all really well behaved. So without further ado, I'm going to invite our first set of speakers up onto the stage, please, so we can sit here. We have Stephanie, AJ, Siddarth, Nick, and Jenny and Hannah. I think that's everyone. And so this session is going to be while you get here on rare disease research and funding. And we'll be exploring that a little bit more with the discussion in the second half of this session. But first, we have lots of people who've done some fantastic research. I'm going to talk a little bit about it and really some of the challenges that they faced and how they went about it. And Stephanie is even magically in the right seat, so she can go first. Thank you, Stephanie.
So good morning, everybody. I'm Stephanie, and today I'm going to be speaking to you about how I've been working hand in hand with a patient foundation group and how we have been trying to develop therapies for our ultra-rare disease. But first of all, I will take you back to 2015 when I joined the Holden Lab at UCL, where we do gene discovery using an approach of deep phenotyping and genome sequencing. One of the main bottlenecks of gene discovery is that 86% of genomic studies are derived primarily from populations of European ancestry. And for this reason, we decided in 2016 to focus much of our patient recruitment in consanguineous families primarily found in low to middle income countries. We set up the Synapse study group where we have collected around 20,000 families with ultra-rare neurological disease. And then in 2019, the MRC funded us to set up an international center for genomic medicine. Together with different data depositories, such as Genomics England, we have helped to discover a new gene called NARS1, which has been implicated with early onset neurodevelopmental disease. And this is a tRNA synthetase deficiency. It's one of 37 members of the gene family. It's been linked with disorders of the brain, but primarily of the central nervous system, and it's a very important enzyme for protein making. So in 2020, we published the first patient group, which presents with early life symptoms. Examples are developmental delay, microcephaly, ataxia, and epilepsy, and this is a very severe multi-organ disease. We have around 50 families that present with this disease. Unfortunately, 2 children have passed away, and epilepsy is a huge burden, and there's currently no treatment options. So as soon as we published and discovered the gene, we tried to raise awareness to increase the NARS1 community. And one of the first things we did was to make a Facebook group where families could actually connect with each other and share information. We have set up a registry under RareX with the aim of carrying out a natural history study, and we provide surveys to the patients and the caregivers to understand what is important for them. Then we try to increase our understanding of the disease to develop meaningful clinical endpoints with the aim of preparing these families for a clinical trial and to design disease concept models. At the same time, we worked on putting together different tools. So we have patient cells available, we have reprogrammed stem cells into organoids, and we have designed a mouse model that partly recapitulates the phenotype of the disease. So these are some of the achievements so far of the community of NARS1. We have tools that we have available for industry partners and funders to work with us, and the aim is really to develop an AAV gene therapy approach. So my main message today is that we really need to get our goals aligned here. So if you have a family with a rare disease, obviously they care about a therapy, they have a sense of urgency, and this is something that we don't usually have as academics. We think more about grants, publications, tenure positions. Curing a patient is not one of our priorities when we join academia. But how do we get our aims aligned here? We really need to be able to develop and offer a therapy to these families, but also to stick to their sense of urgency. And we need to be able to work with them and collaborate and hear them, but also increase our patient group to make it more attractive to funders and industry. So just to summarize, it really takes a village to develop therapies. We need to be able to manage expectations, to be transparent with the families and make them understand that not every therapy is going to work. But for this reason, it needs to be based on solid biology, and we need to be able to guarantee funding to carry out that proof of concept experiment. And most importantly, we need to be doing things in parallel, so not to wait for something else to finish before we start the next thing. So thank you very much. We have a poster, so please come and talk to us.
Thank you so much.
So thank you very much, everyone. My name's Mcknight. I have a rare disease. I'm a carer for multiple people in the family with multiple different rare diseases. And I'm also a rare disease researcher. And I love the phrase from the youth group that said, actually, I'm a better scientist because I've lived with a rare disease and I've been troubleshooting all my life. I thought that was perfect. So I run a rare disease research group in Northern Ireland. And it's not that we have research projects that we're looking for PPIE input. We're not looking for patients and carers and families to input. Absolutely every piece of research that we do in Northern Ireland for our rare disease research is driven by patients. They've initiated it, they've conceived it, and they help deliver it. We can't do everything. Lots of people have ideas and we have to say, that's great, it needs sorted, but we can't do it just now. The tools aren't right, the funding isn't right, we don't have the right local expertise. We'll park it and see what we can do. And other projects we go, yep, that's a priority, it's timely, let's do something about it together. So from my perspective, patients and the public and people who are living with the rare disease, people who are treating people with rare disease, are the foundations. If we get those building blocks right, then we can build a castle. We're building a strong future. People living with rare disease are the people that should set the research priorities. They know what matters most to them. They know what will help them most in their day-to-day lives. So we have a broad stakeholder engagement. We have companies, we have clinicians, associated healthcare professionals, education specialists. RAIN and RARTAC are two of our All-Ireland Rare Disease Research Networks. We're delighted there's more than 135 institutes involved. Patients have a core part to play when we're thinking about the practical design and delivery of research projects or of clinical trials. There is no point in scientists developing a project and saying, somebody with spinal muscular atrophy is going to run on a machine for 10 minutes when they can't actually stand up out of their wheelchair. You may laugh, but you'll be surprised at the number of grant panels I've sat on and went, someone with that disease will never be able to do what you're proposing. Did you really engage with the families and the patients when you were designing it? Really keen that we're looking to minimise inequalities. Patients are the ones that help empower the research and drive the implementation and the impact. We can help, as scientists, design robust research that helps deliver evidence-based medicine. But let's face it, it's the people on the ground who go to their local politicians, who go to their Department of Health, who go to the Department of Educational Support, for example, and say, we need this, we need it now. And that's what helps drive the policy change. We build the evidence, and together we can change the policy. It's very much a collaborative endeavour, so we have a mix of scientific research meetings and social engagements. Often the best ideas come from a lunch or a coffee meeting where somebody's presenting an idea and then we iteratively work through it with a broad range of stakeholders in the room. A couple of research projects I'm just going to fly through. So we did a lot of work in the first year of COVID-19 looking at the impact on people living with rare diseases. We had more than 1,000 respondents. Northern Ireland's total population is 1.8 million, about 110,000 people live with rare diseases. But for some of our research projects on diabetes and kidney disease, we had about 200 respondents. For rare disease, we had more than 1,000. And I'm sure none of the things on that slide would surprise people. Almost 70% of people living with rare disease isolated more than 6 months in the first wave of the pandemic. 83% of people's lives changed. 60% of people were providing care for people they lived with. But really that study...
I'm sorry.
2 seconds. That study led us to do more work for mental health, and come and see us at the poster.
Thank you very much for the organisers for this very kind invitation. So I'll be very quick. We've established a Manchester Rare Condition Centre with a mission of improving the lives of patients and families living with rare conditions. And I'm wasting my time here. That's it. So I won't really talk about the structure of the MRCC, but I'll talk about the themes under which all the work is undertaken. So we've got 3 themes: research, clinical, education, and engagement. And we strongly believe that actually all these the work going on in these 3 themes, it supports each other. And there are these strategic aims for our center. So we want to advance diagnosis and coordination of individuals with rare conditions, enhance treatments and research capacity for rare conditions, and to progress awareness and advocacy for individuals with rare conditions. And we are supported by significant infrastructure, but again, I won't talk about that because I want to win that chocolate. But really what we want to see, the next step for our center, is to have a focus on improving diagnosis and enabling clinical trials for ultra-rare and novel conditions. And that's really important because all the challenges faced by individuals with rare conditions are even more accentuated for individuals with ultra-rare conditions, be it discovery of those conditions, diagnosis, finding the mechanisms, finding treatments, implementing the clinical trials, and actually taking those therapies to the market and for implementation in the NHS. So there's a long series of bottlenecks which exist, and we are really keen to tackle them in a disease-agnostic, gene-agnostic, and modality-agnostic way. So that's really our pitch, if this is supposed to be a pitch. But thank you. Can I take the chocolate now?
Thank you. So I'm Nick. I run a patient group called the AKU Society, and I'm also the chair and co-founder of Beacon for Rare Diseases. And more importantly, I have 2 boys who have the rare disease alkaptonuria, known as AKU, or black bone disease. And over the next 3 minutes and a half, I will explain to you the kind of research that we've been doing. This is our hero, Sir Archibald Garrod, who 120 years ago first identified AKU as an inherited disease, the first disease to ever be shown to be inherited. This is the AKU tetrad. You can see the black urine, top right, which is how my children were diagnosed when they were babies. You can see bottom left, the black bone. That's an elbow joint of someone with alkaptonuria. And you can see the black spots in the eyes and the blue pigment in the ears. This is the metabolic pathway, breakdown of tyrosine. And at each level in the pathway, there is a different disease: phenylketonuria, tyrosinemia type 1, alkaptonuria, which leads to this increase in homogenesic acid, and the miracle drug that we've developed called nitisinone, which is an enzyme inhibitor, which was originally developed as a weed killer in the 80s, then developed for tyrosinemia type 1, and which over the past 15 years we have developed for alkaptonuria. We set up a European consortium called Develop a Cure. We raised £12 million in all, and we did 3 studies: a phase 2 study, dose-finding study, a phase 3 study on 140 patients, the largest ever study of an inborn error of metabolism, and a cross-sectional study to see at what age to start treating. We reached statistical significance. The European Medicines Agency gave us a positive opinion, and in October 2020, the European Commission gave us a marketing authorization. Even more amazing, this drug nitisinone is now being developed with our help as an anti-malarial, because when mosquitoes bite a patient with nitisinone, they absorb the nitisinone, which then mixes with the protein, leads to a spike in tyrosine and kills the mosquitoes. So they are developing it as a way of combating malaria in developing countries with the Liverpool School of Tropical Disease. These are the number of patients we know worldwide, an ultra-rare genetic disease, as you can see. These are all the AKU societies we've set up. This is the global registry that we funded, which is launching in a couple of months with a company called Dendrites, and these are the next treatments that we are developing. Tyrosine inhibitors to work with nitisinone against the side effects, which we're developing with 2 pharma companies and which are our own funding. An mRNA therapy, which is currently in the labs, which will be developed for AKU and other rare diseases, and gene therapy that we're just starting. Thank you.
Thank you very much for Joe and the organisers for inviting me here today. I've been to a lot of the online offerings, so it's great to be here in person. So I'm going to speak today about the engagement work that we've been doing with the Low Syndrome Charities and Dent Disease Foundation. So Jonathan Gadsby is my postdoc who's working on this project. Helene Dorflinger and Natalie Walls are our public engagement team in the Gurdon Institute. Jennifer Meyer from the Dent Disease Foundation, and Teresa Horgan and Jerry Kubicki from the Low Syndrome Association, which is the USA charity, but also with an international reach. So low syndrome and dent disease 2 are caused by mutations in a lipid phosphatase named after the disease, the oculocerebral renal syndrome of Low. It's not entirely clear what makes the mutations cause the different types of disease. The kidney phenotypes are similar between the disease, characterised by low molecular weight proteinuria, and end-stage kidney disease is the main cause of death. Low syndrome is the more severe of the two, also accompanied by learning disabilities, seizures sometimes, and other brain structural abnormalities. And low syndrome is typically diagnosed with the congenital cataracts, so it has a significant eye phenotype. There are also effects on growth and blood clotting, so it is a multi-system disease with a high burden on the families and caregivers. So my work, I'm a cell biologist, I'm a basic biologist by training, and became interested in this area when I could see that some of the new biology that we're discovering had an impact, and I thought that we could repurpose some existing therapeutics that might be of help. And so this is the work that we've taken towards this over the past sort of 6 years or so. So initially we tested various PI3 kinase inhibitors that were developed for cancer in immortalized cells, and then moved to collaborate with Olivier Devois' lab in the mouse model, showing that we could increase the endocytic uptake and thereby have effects on the low molecular weight proteinuria that's the symptom of the disease. And I've got more on the poster about the mechanism of what we think is happening for anybody that's interested. And next year, subject to ethical approval, we're hoping to move into clinical trials in Dent-2 disease with a small number of patients for a proof of concept. So as a basic researcher, this was all very new to me, the kind of interactions with patient groups, and I've learned a lot from interacting with the Cambridge Rare Disease Network events over the past few years. So I thought immediately I should be starting to bringing this to my master's students in my role as an educator. So for our cell biologists and biochemists, I now bring the patient advocacy in and have the representatives come and speak to the students. And in turn, I go and speak at their conferences and produce kind of lay accessible slides, trying to get across the actual important points that they want to take home from the science. I organised the recent research meeting for low syndrome in Europe in collaboration with my colleagues in Italy, and we brought in a specific patient advocacy and patient voice session in the meeting, which worked very well and actually stimulated a lot of discussion amongst the researchers. We even had a man that suffers from low syndrome speaking at the meeting, Paul James. We've started a co-creation project with our public engagement team at the Gurdon Institute to co-create a series of short videos from the different perspectives of the advocacy groups, the patients and the researchers, so that we can learn from each other, use these in talks and websites to increase awareness and funding. And I'm sitting on the medical and scientific advisory boards now for both the UK charity, the US Low Syndrome charity, and the Dent Disease Foundation to volunteer my molecular and cellular expertise. And that's really helping me learn from the different specialities that sit on the advisory board to understand the needs and aims of both the Dent Disease 2 and the Low Syndrome communities, which are different as we're moving towards clinical trials. Thank you.
So I'm from the NIHR BioResource. Taking a step back from any specific rare disease research, I suppose we don't necessarily conduct research ourselves. We facilitate research for other teams. We work across multiple disease areas, and that does include more than 50 rare diseases. And hopefully from the poster and from this very quick overview of some of our inclusion work that we've been doing, you can see how a person isn't one thing. A person doesn't just have a rare disease. They might be in an underserved community in another way. So working with these groups does impact and is to the benefit across the multiple areas we work in. We've worked in two specific areas in the past 12 months in particular. The first of which is the development of a project called Improving Black Health Outcomes, with a view to creating a cohort of individuals from black communities in the UK to further research that has remained lacking, and with a community that lacks trust in the healthcare system, and with the aims of research. In developing IBO, as it's known, we have been engaging with various community groups with the help of an organisation called Equality Health. That's been discussing our approach to introducing IBO in these communities, considering our materials for recruitment, so the information sheets, understanding from those communities that the key information they want to be informed about, the questions they want to see answered immediately, how to improve trust with them, designing some of those materials as well. In particular, we've been looking at sickle cell disorder with Genomics England. In some contexts, it would be described as a rare disease. Within the black community, it has a very high prevalence with about 15,000 individuals affected in the UK. So we've worked specifically with sickle cell disorder groups to understand, again, the information they want to see presented to them at the point of recruitment. And then in this brilliant picture that you can see here, is used in our promotion of the DNA Children and Young People's Health Resource. It's called Decipher. This is launching to recruit children and young people up to the age of 15 into the BioResource. It's very much driven with families and the children and young people in mind. They're involved in the design of our materials. We have young ambassadors sharing their stories about being involved in research and really advocating for the programme in their schools as well. So we've done a lot of engagement and involvement work there as well to make sure, again, the right questions are being answered, the right information is being presented, and that people feel represented and can identify with what we're trying to do. It's all ongoing work. They are both in their first phases, essentially, to get this underway. They are Decipher's launched. IBO will launch in the next month, hopefully, and we will then go on to the next round to make improvements. The next big key piece of work, I guess for me, is looking at how we make our materials accessible. So it starts with translating into other languages, but it goes beyond that into how we present those materials, whether that's with videos, infographics, audio recordings of the information, so that it's accessible as widely as possible. And we strike the balance between informing people of all the necessary information while making it easy and accessible to understand. We have a stand outside, and you can read the full poster outside as well. Thank you.
That was impressive stuff. That was really good. But Siddarth, you did win the chocolate. Hands down. Because they were so awesome, I think we do have time for like maybe one or two questions. Oh, yeah, you really get the chocolate. It's not just a display chocolate bar. It's a real, actual chocolate bar. I think we have time for maybe one, possibly two, if they're short questions, before we thank them for being such good sports.
Thank you very much. The reason I've come today is I've got a child with rare disease. We'll do that later. The way, because I have no medical knowledge, the way I had a startup that didn't start, and I thought in my head, okay, I'm going to do a startup that's going to help drive research and drive funding. So my first question for this panel, and Nick, we definitely need to talk because I love what you've done. But what motivates someone to say, I want to research that disease? So that's for the researchers. And then for the funders or people who have access to funding, what makes someone want to fund? Right? Because in my head it's, well, because it's a new drug or you're going to patent it, right? So what do I need to say? Go start it with bullet points. What's the thing I need to say in my elevator pitch that says, you want to research this disease because this?
So that is a brilliant question and exactly the topic of the next half of this session. So I might ask us if we park the funding part for the next set, because we've got a lot of funders coming up on the stage who I'm sure you'll want to hear from. But what makes you want to actually do the research and ask for it? Nick, is that... We start with you? Or?
Yeah, I think that is the two key questions that you've just asked. I mean, it's absolutely spot on. For the first one, there's, well, from my perspective, we just found a clinician who was just a really kind, but also incredibly smart and hardworking person. You know, and we were very fortunate because we found him right at the beginning. And it wasn't me who found it; it was another patient called Bob Gregory in Liverpool in 2001. And the guy he found, Professor Ranganathan, 20 years later, is now semi-retired and all that, and still working full time on this in his spare time, publishing, doing research, fundraising, everything. And for me, that was the single most important factor in actually our success. That finding that person, that Professor Ranganathan. And he's really kind, he's really hardworking, he's a walking encyclopedia of medical knowledge, and he's just an all-round great guy. So what motivates him, I think scientific curiosity, a real drive to help the patients because he's a clinician, and just real generosity.
I was just going to add to that. So from a clinician scientist perspective, so absolutely everything that you said, that curiosity and drive is absolutely essential. So I'll just probably illustrate that with a very quick example.
Very quick. You've earned yourself about 30 seconds, I think.
So, for example, I see a family in the northwest of England. They have a condition which is completely unique to that family. And the presentation of that, those patients, unfortunately, is that they're fine up till the age of 40 or 50, and then they may have sudden bowel rupture, and that can be catastrophic. Now, there's probably no other family in the world with that particular presentation, and we have discovered the genetic cause for it, and we think that there might be some ideas as to how to treat those individuals. Now, if we don't work with that family to help them and to develop a cure for that condition, no one else in the world would. So it's also in terms of being at the right place at the right time, because no matter how much we want, we cannot help everyone. So where is that extra bit of USP that we can bring in, plus being connected directly to patients and families really makes a huge difference, because trying to treat a condition where you've actually never met a patient with that can be slightly difficult to find the motivation for.
Thank you, and thank you everyone on the panel for being such good sports and sharing such interesting work. So thank you. Nick, you stay there, so we'll swap over. We're just going to start off. The panel will just briefly introduce themselves and the kind of funding that they're involved in, and then we're going to move into a bit of a discussion about exactly that question we had from the back around, what makes a good application? What makes you want to fund something? And then talk a bit about collaborations between patients, companies, clinicians, etc., and how they can be effective. I think we'll just go down the line, unless you would prefer to wait. You can go, run. Richard.
Hi, so my first confession is I'm not a funder. Seratium are a small consultancy. We work a lot with funding, and I guess what I was wanting to introduce today is the European Commission, and from 2024, the UK is once again able to join that as an equal partner. They have been a real friend for the rare disease community, I believe. So they split their funding into 7-year programs. In the previous 2 programs, they put 2.4 billion euros towards rare disease research. And in our own experience, we were involved in 8 projects that were funded during those programs. and they represented about 40 million euros of grant funding. But what was also interesting, and maybe Nick's had a similar experience, that grant funding then acts as a leverage. So I think instead of 40 million euros, the projects that we worked on were probably worth closer to 200 million. So there's a lot of funding available. Some of it is dedicated to rare disease, some of it is less so. To give you an example of the types of project they fund, we've got a stand outside with the Tiger project on. But essentially, what makes a good project is a nice intervention, and that may be, typically that's a drug, but it could also be social interventions as well. Ideally, elements of biomarker discovery, because normally those tools aren't available. Ideally, strong patient involvement, and that's not just as subjects of clinical studies, but that's as people who are experts in the disease, and also very often experts in the regulatory pathways as well. And I think then trying to move from the lab and the preclinical through to the clinical and along that regulatory pathway is really important. So I guess my expertise is turning other people's research projects into nice stories that persuade an evaluator it's worth funding.
Hi everyone, my name is Priya Vishwanathan and I'm a Senior Research Collaboration Manager at the National Institute for Health and Care Research, or NIHR. It's really difficult to say what we fund. We fund a lot. So to just give a very short recap or a short explanation, we fund clinical research across all parts of the clinical research pathway. You've heard some brilliant examples today from Sid and Hannah, which is also NIHR funded. That's the NIHR BioResource. So we fund a lot of clinical research infrastructure through the biomedical research centers and the clinical research facilities, which we heard from Sid. But we also fund research programs through 11 research programs as well, but as well as career development awards through the NIHR Academy. So there's a lot of funding available, and you'll hear more from Rich and Joanna. We do partner with other charities and funders for specific rare disease initiatives as well. So for us, what makes a good project or a good fundable piece of work, it is about the patients, and at NIHR, PPIE is expected as part of every NIHR award across the spectrum of the research pathway, really, from developing the research proposal all the way out to dissemination. And hopefully that's a quick summary and recap. But do reach out if you have any other questions, whether you're a person living with a rare condition or you are looking for NIHR funding.
So I think all the funders are around for funding speed dating later. So this is almost like a pitch if you like what you're hearing and you want to hear more, go on a date with them later, I think is what I meant to say. Nick?
Yes, so you just heard my story. So the AKU Society, we fundraise, okay, and we have our staff fundraiser here, Michael, who's just at the back. If you want advice on fundraising, speak to him. And we fund, okay, and our funding model is really based on a single institution, which is Liverpool University and the Royal Liverpool University Hospital. Those are the ones who've been funding for the past 20 years. And as a reason for that, we are a tiny patient group. We work on an ultra-rare disease, so we decided to put all our eggs in the same basket. And for us, it's worked really well. I think for other groups, they might have a different funding model. But that has worked really well for us, and we've had some really good outcomes from that. And that has been really the centre of a model of research where we have research centres a bit everywhere. So what do I look for in a funding application? Well, as a father, and I'm not a scientist, okay, my PhD was in social psychology, so it's got nothing to do with actually any of the rare disease research. But as a father, I look for two things, okay. I look for, one, will the project I'm funding get me anywhere closer to a better treatment or a cure for my kids or for people with AKU, And that's why we're now funding mRNA therapy, gene therapy, tyrosine inhibitors. That's the first thing. Then we have a whole scientific advisory board that looks at all the science and all that. And then the second thing that's important for me is the individual that I'm funding. So is the postdoc that I'm funding or the PhD that I'm funding, are they a really hard worker? Are they smart? Are they reliable? And are they persevering? That's what I'm interested in. And if they're a really good person, then that's who I will fund.
Thank you. Thank you to the organisers for inviting me to be on this panel. I'm Emma Davis. I'm Associate Director of Preclinical at Helix. I'm representing the industry aspect of funders on this panel. So Helix are a tech bio company that are based here in Cambridge. We use AI and machine learning to find potential new treatments for rare diseases. So from a funding perspective, we are interested in funding collaborations. You know, we recognise that we're not experts in the rare disease. We've got expertise in drug discovery and how to get drugs into clinical trials, but we don't have deep expertise in the diseases necessarily that we're working on. So we work closely with patient groups, clinicians, and academics to help move our programs along, so access to things like animal models, some of the things that were mentioned earlier, I think AJ and Stephanie. AJ mentioned about endpoints, I think, in clinical trials. You know, that's key to when we're deciding a project, what are the things that are going to make a meaningful difference from patients. And I think Stephanie mentioned about really strong science and validated models and understanding of the disease that we can use to really decide whether that drug is going to make a difference, hopefully when we get to patients. Yeah, thank you.
Hi, so I'm Joanna. I'm from LifeArc. I know there's a number of you in the audience who already know us well, but for those who don't, we are a self-funding medical research charity. We have 3 main arms to the company. So we've got our own internal translational science function with wet labs. We offer translational advice in many different guises. And we also offer translational funding. So everything that we do is translation. We don't support the basic underpinning science. We have 2 perpetual funds that are in the rare disease space. So I manage the philanthropic fund, and that fund is focused on therapeutic and diagnostic development, so critical path translation we're looking for in that fund. We also have a fairly new fund, which is the Gene Therapy Innovation Fund, and that supports GMP, so clinical grade gene therapy vector manufacture through our network of innovation hubs. We also have launched in July our Translational Challenge in rare disease. So it's a really exciting time for us at the moment in rare disease. We've got over 100 million to invest in translation in rare disease. The first initiative that we've launched as part of that Translational Challenge is our Translational Rare Disease Centres call. So there's a budget of 40 million on that call, and we're looking really to transform translational research in rare disease in the academic environment in the UK. So we've invited applications for that. We've got 44 expressions of interest, and there are some applicants here in this room. They span the breadth of the translational challenges in rare disease in the UK. So some of them are focused on building platform capabilities. Others are looking at the diagnostic odyssey. We've got some which are focusing on therapeutic development. So they really do span the breadth. We've done something a bit novel with this call. So we actually, at the EOI stage, we grouped applicants together where we saw alignment between their proposals. And we've asked them to come together and put full applications in as a consortium. So it's sort of an arranged marriage model that we've used there. And it's working well. We've had 18 full stage applications in. They came in at the end of September. So now we've got the tough job of looking through all of those and trying to decide which we support with our 40 million. It sounds like a lot, but actually when you see what's on the table, it really isn't. We're probably looking to support around 4 centres, and they are chunky sized centres, so sort of 10 million for each of them. So, we've been told by the applicant pool that amount of money is really something that they can do something with. It's a decent enough amount to really make a difference, and that's what we're looking to do with this call. We want to make a step change to translation in the UK. What makes a good application? For the philanthropic fund, I would say focus. So everything that we do is for patient benefit. we're in a fortunate position where we're not looking for a return. So our driver is patient benefit. We need to see proposals that are focused, the development path is mapped, we can see a clear path to patients. So that's key for the philanthropic fund. For the centres call, really we're looking for innovative ideas that make a step change. And yeah, I will be at the speed dating, so please come and have a chat later. And I'll hand over to Richard.
Thank you. Thanks very much. So I'm Richard Evans. I work at the Medical Research Council. We're probably a major public funder in the biomedical space. So we're a public funder, so we're spending taxpayers' money. That's important to note. We fund all the way from basic discovery science through to translation and impact, ranging from work in cells, animal models, computer models, and into people, for example, in experimental medicine, for example. We have a natural interface with NIHR, so we might fund early stage clinical studies or early stage trials, but later stage trials would be NIHR sort of territory. We describe ourselves often as a disease agnostic funder, so we're funding high quality science in any area of disease or health. Although the particular board I work on is population and systems medicine, and one of its 3 opportunity areas, so kind of highlight areas, is rare diseases. So that's an opportunity and a sign of how important rare disease research is to us as a funder. A major investment that Priya mentioned is the MRC NIHR Rare Disease Research Platform, which started in July this year, so you might start to get more visibility of it. You'll be seeing activities run by that platform very soon. It's a 5-year investment of around 14 million for a set of focused nodes working on 11 different areas of rare disease research, and all brought together by a coordinating hub. And that coordinating hub will be particularly important in engaging with stakeholders such as patients with rare diseases, families, charities, industry, all the way through to regulators and ethicists who are really important in that space. And that's a unique investment really about networking and enabling rare disease research. You've heard a lot about there's a lot going on in the UK, and that investment is really to make it easier to learn lessons across the piece. For example, Nick's a great example of achieving real progress in an area. If we can learn lessons from that and roll it out, then that would be a fantastic sign of success. Excuse me. In terms of what we like to see, I guess we'd like a project that's in an area of need, that's also feasible, and patient engagement is crucial to that role, making that case. We're quite an early stage funder, so I guess we want to see a pathway to impact maybe in 10 or 20 years. Maybe not. There may not be immediate benefit. And we like to see a lot of team science, so the right team that can deliver a project. So that might be patient engagement, clinicians, lab scientists, computer scientists, so on, the whole range of interests. So I'll stop there.
Thank you, Richard. I got separated from the mic. That was a terrible mistake. Thank you so much for answering the question about what a good application looks like. Some of us were talking before this session about how collaboration and patient involvement isn't perhaps always where we would want it to be. And so I was just wondering if, before we get kicked off the stage, we could explore just a little what we're doing, either advice for how to make that collaboration successful, or Joanna, I know you've been doing some work to encourage that in the applications. I don't know if you want to comment on that. Then I can hang on to this mic, you see.
Yeah, sure. What we do is for patient benefit, and that is obviously the driver. In our Rare Disease Centres call, we have made quite a big section on PPI&E, and that will be one of the main criteria that we assess these applications on. We've really encouraged those applicants to go out and speak to the patient groups about what they're doing, and really form a properly costed PPI&E strategy. So we want to support this, and we want to facilitate that. We don't expect patient groups to be doing this work for free. And I think as a funder, it's really important that we stress that this should be properly costed. So that's for the centres. For the philanthropic fund, I think we haven't probably done enough in PPI&E to make that a central focus of the application. So that is changing. We are recruiting a PPI&E lead into our team now. And we're also reshaping that application form to make sure that PPI&E is up front and central there as well. So we can do more, and we're working on it.
And Priya, I think you mentioned patient involvement, and I know that that's all over NIHR applications these days.
It is an absolute requirement that you involve patients across all parts of your funding proposal, from, like I said, from developing your proposal all the way down to disseminating how you can plan to disseminate your research. Patient participation and involvement is key for NIHR, without which clinical research wouldn't happen. So we're very grateful that people do participate in the clinical trials. Just wanted to add, I know this isn't part of the collaboration, but the NIHR do have Be Part of Research as a digital recruitment tool for participants to get involved. Just as a slight advertisement, there is an online survey as part of the Rare Disease Action Plan, Action 27, which is a survey specifically for people living with rare conditions and families and carers. So do get involved, do submit your answers to the survey as well. But without patients and without patient benefit, without that clear line of sight what that patient benefit is, it's much harder to fund the research.
And Nick, you're sort of almost coming from the other side, so trying to get people involved as a patient organisation and collaborating. And I know Ranger has been a superstar. I'm going to guess that not everyone you've had to collaborate with has been as quick to want to jump on board. I don't want you to name and shame, but any tips and advice for the people about how to create and drive those collaborations?
Well, that's interesting, actually. That's a really good question. There's, I think what really worked for us, actually, was just to kind of drive the stuff. I mean, we see ourselves as a facilitator as the patient group. You know, we're not scientists, we're not clinicians or anything like that. So we're there to facilitate, and we're there to try and create enthusiasm around our particular disease, because there's so many diseases out there and all that kind of stuff. And what's really worked well for us, which is quite elementary, is just every year having a scientific meeting, you know, and raising the funds for that, and then paying for the scientists to come over and the clinicians, and we also invite industry and stuff, you know. And that works really well because the scientists love it. They have a chance to kind of chat about something that they're interested in. It allows us to draw in people who might be a bit peripheral or new to the area, and then they'll come along and I think these are quite a serious bunch of scientists. I really want to be involved in that, and that's really how we've managed to grow it, you know. So that is kind of the first advice I give to kind of emerging patient groups is try and just hold annual scientific meetings. Our first one was in 2006 or 7, and there were like 8 of us, you know. And our last one was in Brussels, which was funded by the European Joint Programme on Rare Diseases, and I think we had about 80 or 100 people there and stuff. So that is the key thing, you know, just kind of creating enthusiasm and getting people interested in your research, you know.
Great, that's really helpful. Richie,
Can I
got to give the mic back.
Can I just add quickly, sorry, and put those scientific presentations online because they're so valuable for other people that come later on, how I've used them personally when patient groups have the scientific talks and put them on YouTube, invaluable for someone that's trying to learn about a disease.
Okay, I was just going to give a couple of examples. So we've worked on a project called Vision DMD, so it's with the DMD patient community. They were fundamental in, I mean, Nick's talking about raising funding, they were fundamental in doing some of the really early stage high-risk research. And because it's expensive, Duchenne's obviously has a very organised patient community. But instead of clustering projects, they clustered funding for one project. So they started pooling money for different elements of the project so that where 1 or 2 patient groups were able to have much more impact. So I think one key thing is it's not just about involvement in the projects. These patient groups are actually driving the fundamental research, and they stayed with it. And actually we took a venture philanthropy model. So rather than just them giving grants, they gave grants that turned into loans that then gave them a return on the investment. So it wasn't just industry winning. And the Vision DMD, the vamorolone project, is now with EMA, and we're hoping to get approval in the next couple of months. So that's one example. Another is we've got a project at the moment, and we're working with to cystinosis foundation, so that's rare kidney disease, and there we're bringing PhD students into scientific meetings with the patient groups, and those scientists are learning at the very beginning of their career about the patient stories and about the disease from a human perspective rather than just the omics perspective, which I think is also important.
Thank you. Thank you, Richie. I've got a feeling we're going to be kicked off in seconds. Richard, I've not come back to you, and everyone else has given a bit of advice for the people, good people in the room. Do you have anything you wanted to add? Some final thoughts?
I guess I'll just echo what we've said about collaboration. Getting patients involved early in the design of the project is really important. Amy had a nice example earlier. We see lots of projects that aren't feasible. So patient engagement is important around feasibility and show the need. But it's also, and MRC has always recognised that, but I think it's also important to have patient reviews earlier on, for example, in designing research strategies, before you get to the point of a research call. So I think as a funder, we're probably going to be doing more in that space.
Thank you. And can you join me in thanking the fantastic panel?